Morning, everyone, and welcome to Ask the Expert webinar. I'm SJ and I'll be your host for today. Before we get started, I'd just like to briefly introduce our organizers for today. So get out your phones and get ready to scan if you would like to follow their updates. Firstly, this webinar is hosted by Shen Academic Consulting and they provide personalized academic and career guidance. Within their network, they have distinguished academics that have worked extensively within the Chinese and Australian education and academic circles. Ask the Expert is presented in partnership with ACASE, a not-for-profit organization supporting Australian startups through technology commercialization and Asia-Pacific innovation. ACASE also provides tailored programs such as Nexus, Nexstar, and Asia Market Sprint to help startups and enterprises enter and grow in the Asia-Pacific market. And finally, CAPS Australia is a not-for-profit organization to support Chinese postgraduate students, young scholars, and visiting scientists in Australia. CAPS has a mission to build a bilateral bridge for Australia, provide an interactive platform, and an informational portal for career development and innovative entrepreneurship. And as you can see, all three of the co-hosts and organizations have huge overlaps and all collaborate closely with the goal of supporting future scientists, academics, and entrepreneurs. And so without further ado, it's my delight to be able to introduce our speakers today. And first we have Amanda. Amanda Belton is a data scientist working with researchers to visualize data. Before a career pivot to academia, she has worked at technology startups as well as large corporations in finance and telecommunications, leading infrastructure technology project delivery teams. Her data visualization work brings a human-centered design ethos to work with playful approaches and empathetic design principles to communicate research visually into the digital realm. Thanks, Amanda. And I'll get you to share your screen.
Thanks, SJ and all the organisations for hosting us. I'm here with my colleague Priyanka. Hi, Priyanka. And I'm just going to talk a bit about my career in industry and in academia. I'm a research data specialist with the Melbourne Data Analytics Platform, a team in University of Melbourne working with research data. I'm going to tell you a bit about a career path in interdisciplinary collaboration. I want to talk about some of the different pathways to impact and the different forms of interdisciplinary collaboration in a tech startup, scaling up systems and software processes as we group. In industry, using visual communication to drive organisational change across a large IT department, and in academia, conducting interdisciplinary research with community co-design workshops and non-traditional research outcomes to visualise the publicly available data about metropolitan Melbourne. After Y2K, the Celtic tiger was roaring. Ireland had and has a vibrant startup culture with a strong ecosystem of institutional supports. I was part of a tech startup with software in Dublin, Ireland, to capture process data from automated manufacturing systems in FDA-regulated industries like pharmaceuticals and breweries. Working at startup can feel like you need to win a hurdle race. The thing is, success happens through an ecosystem of support. It was tough selling a product to companies that have been working on research into the common cold for decades. We had to prove we had a reliable, auditable product that filled a pressing need. And it needed to do it better than our long-established competitors, and that we had the capability to support their work into the future. With Enterprise Ireland's incubator support, we worked with our developers, quality system experts from academia, and our advocates in our existing customer base. The different roles all contributed to an auditable, supportable, and low overhead quality system that fit with our existing software development practices, but could scale as we grew. And we needed to grow and return on the investment from our VC funders. This interdisciplinary work brought together different roles to draw from their unique and deep expertise. And interdisciplinary work benefits from aligned goals. We work together to execute against a business strategy of organic growth in targeted verticals by harnessing new technologies and existing standards. I'm going to bring you a bit closer to home and chat about Australia, working at Suncorp during the merger with Promina, both really large institutions, one banking, one insurance. Our technology infrastructure teams had similar functions with very different roles. I have to say, one of the things I really love about tech careers is you're never going to be the smartest person in the room. You get to work with subject matter experts with amazing, deep expertise. My role led to an organisational change project to implement a service-based operating model, to co-design and implement changes to our roles and processes, to align the work with an agreed model across our different heritages that put the focus on our requester stakeholders. The people needing infrastructure stood up for new products, things like a generalised pricing engine across the brands, and people needing critical infrastructure to be working and incidents to be resolved quickly. Organisational change can be incredibly stressful, and this would impact a department of approximately 800 people. We used visual explanations, visual representations of the operating model to communicate what was changing, how it was changing, and to keep the focus on the system that we were working with and that we were putting in place. We had discussions on pain points, kind of a talkback show radio style opportunity for different team members to connect and find what common pain points we had, what individual pain points we had, and what were the individual challenges that we really wanted to address. Functional non-consensus and productive fiction are not at odds with aligned goals. We experienced friction as we were bringing our work together. We had implicit assumptions about what our jobs were, where our role boundaries were, but finding a way through the non-consensus, through the friction, and making time and space for us as an interdisciplinary team to form, to discuss, and align our individual and team goals. I'm going to bring you even closer into, oh, sorry, I haven't kept track. I'm going to bring you a bit closer to metropolitan Melbourne. So in 2024 a team of us worked with different researchers and community representatives to develop maps that tell a story about metropolitan Melbourne. What is a dog's eye view of Melbourne like? It is blue and green. They do see blue and green. We were working with largely publicly available data sets that needed specialist technical skills to wrangle, to aggregate and visualise, as well as the local expertise from community representatives, including local councils, charities, and other interested organisations. When we were thinking about what a dog's experience of Melbourne is like, we were looking at the amenities like green space. How do they, are they commensurate with the investment that the dogs are contributing, the dogs and their owners are contributing through the registration fees that vary quite a bit across the councils in Melbourne? The participatory map making was quite a ride. We would get contradictory feedback. We would get feedback on the metrics we were using, the visual forms, the data, and we were working with multiple stakeholders. The way we approached it was developing these paper maps that could be annotated through the participatory workshop, and then each month there was a different theme. Data science projects with community impact are working with different drivers. And in this case, we were working with the data science rigor that we needed to bring, what the researchers for each theme wanted to communicate and needed to communicate, working within an editorial timeframe and process, and with participatory feedback to help us refine and develop these visualizations. On the right-hand side, you can see a map showing the libraries, the neighbourhood houses, the social infrastructure across Melbourne. And this visual aesthetic started with a nighttime view of Melbourne. What does it look like from a satellite with all the lights lit up? And so the social infrastructure became those lights that you can see. The team had quite a diverse range of expertise, but we developed sufficient breadth to be able to communicate and collaborate. Interdisciplinary work benefits from aligned goals and the autonomy to apply individual experience in a coordinated way. Impact can be a successful sale of a new product to an existing customer. It can be growing a startup into an international business. It can mean improving service levels and working conditions in a time of disruption. It can mean making complex, large data sets useful and usable for a community. Interdisciplinary collaboration changes in different ecosystems. And I hope I've given you a bit of a picture of a winding career through industry, through academia. I think interdisciplinary collaboration is a transferable skill that can take you all kinds of places. Thanks, SJ.
Thanks so much, Amanda, for that insight across different disciplines, and also your role and your, position also works with a multidisciplinary team. So we'll have some more discussion into that a bit later. So now we have Priyanka. Let me. So, okay. So Priyanka is a research data specialist and also a PhD candidate at the University of Melbourne. And in her PhD, she's currently developing a computational model to represent the influence of behavioral dynamics on the spread of sexually transmitted infections. And previously, she's led health data projects at the Peter Doherty Institute for Infection and Immunity and the Melbourne Data Analytics Platform, and chaired committees advancing computational sciences in infectious diseases. A 2021 STA Superstar of STEM, Priyanka is committed to impactful data-driven health research and science communication. And additionally, Priyanka played a pivotal role as a co-chair of the Research Data Alliance COVID-19 Working Group in 2020, helping develop recommendations and guidelines on data sharing for global pandemic response. So thank you, Priyanka. Please share your screen and take it away.
Thanks for the introduction, Shen. I'm just going to share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? Amazing, thank you. So my presentation is going to be a little bit different from Amanda. I'm taking you all the way back to my teenage years when I had the idea of interdisciplinary research, but that's not what it was called 20 years ago, and how I decided to work in this space. Okay, that works. So I'm Priyanka. Just like Amanda, I'm also a research data specialist at Melbourne Data Analytics Platform. And instead of giving you the traditional definition, I would say that we have a lot of fun in MDAP, where we have the opportunity to work with researchers across multiple disciplines. And what we bring into those projects are our computer science or data analytics expertise. And with that, we have the opportunity to work across health, humanities, social sciences, all sorts of biology domains. So we are pretty lucky to be in a position like that. And yes, the word interdisciplinary defines us. So I work as a research data specialist there. I'm also a PhD candidate, as Shen mentioned in my introduction. defining my work as in one title is a little bit hard. I do call myself a bioinformatician sometimes. I call myself a health data specialist sometimes. They kind of both go hand in hand. I'll dive a bit deeper into what these terms mean. Um, so a bit about me. I grew up in India. So I was 22, 23 when I moved to Australia 11, 12 years ago. I've spent about 10 years in research and data, and mainly in biology, as in biomedical research and health. I'm currently in the third year of my PhD, and I'm powered by coffee and curiosity. I should also add that I'm also powered by rabbit holes and pivots that I often take, but we will not get into that. So this is an honest conversation that I'm aiming to have with everyone to talk about how stories are not linear often, but pivot and how I've said and zigzag. So it's never a straight path. I'm not saying this is how everyone should pursue academia. This is not how people should do research. It's not a list of wins or career advice that, this is how you should go about your career. This is probably for those who are thinking about research and how to go about it, and also take some inspiration from Amanda's profile and think about how you can sort of bring them together as she has. And my background is entirely research, so there's no sort of industry experience here. So I do truly admire people like Amanda who've worked across industry as well as research, and they can bring a lot of those expertise together. Okay, so I said 14 years, but I think it's longer than that. But when I started doing the math, I realized this has gone longer. Anyway, so year 11 biology is where it all starts. Then I'll talk a bit about how I did my undergrad and what projects I worked on in my undergrad, how the journey in Melbourne started 11 years ago, and the kind of research that I did in my master's, and then how I pivoted into different roles since then, and what got me to my PhD in 2024. It didn't feel linear at the time, but now it seems like it's a straight pathway and it all adds up. So when I was 16, like a lot of people growing up in India, I wanted to be a doctor. So it's not unheard or unusual for people to have those aspirations. But if you know the population of India, it's pretty competitive to get into med school. You have to be pretty awesome to get it. I was 100% certain that I'll become a doctor until reality hit me. So trying to get into medical school was ridiculously competitive. My mom said, "How about bioinformatics?" And at the time, bioinformatics was not very well known. Um, and I was really good with tech because even when I was a kid, I would be very interested in understanding how gadgets worked. I would never look at the instruction manual. So my mom thought, okay, she loves tech. She loves playing around with technology. So mom said, let's go and look at what bioinformatics is, where medicine meets tech. So the lesson is listen to your mom. I say sometimes, where I do listen to her all the time, really. So with undergrad, the way bioinformatics program was structured in India, we did a whole bunch of foundational engineering courses because it is an engineering program. So in the year 1 and 2, we did a lot of biomedical sciences, so microbiology, virology, pharmacology. So we learned all of that. We also had a lot of computer science foundational subjects. So it was basically training you to work in the area of health and use a lot of computer science and statistical expertise. I was never good at statistics, still trying to be good, but computer science is what caught my eye. So my project in my undergrad was understanding how protein structures fold. And the way protein structures fold is quite important from a biological standpoint because their structure, the physical structure of proteins, sort of dictates what their functions would be. So proteins can be switched on and off for specific biological functions. So their overall structure matters a lot. And sometimes you wouldn't have those sort of 3D structures to work with in a computational setting. So that's where you do a lot of computational research on proteins. So what you would do is you take the building blocks and then you predict the structure of a 3D, or you to predict the 3D structure of the protein. And back in those early days when bioinformatics was still quite new, it would take a long time to do this sort of structure prediction. Until today, we have AlphaFold, and AlphaFold uses deep learning methods to predict structures, and it can do it 50x faster than what we were able to do. We were doing it very slowly and it would take us like multiple hours to even predict the tiniest protein structure. But now things can be done at scale. What got me very interested at the time is how computational biology is really cool. So you could mimic the human structure or the human metabolism in a system and then observe how the protein changes in that system without having to do any sort of experiments in humans. And that's where computational biology seemed very cool. And I thought I started developing my own code at the time, which was not even part of my undergrad, but I was doing it purely out of interest. And I realized how code can answer some biology questions, and you don't need big credentials to start solving problems. And also, don't compare your draft to someone's finished product. Like that was a really small piece of software that I constructed, and it stayed there. We didn't do anything with it, but now it seems like if I had taken it somewhere, it would have gone. It would have been quite an important piece of tool, important tool. And then in between, after I finished my undergrad, I started working at a tech company, looking at bugs, finding reports. Spoiler alert, like my mom was sort of working there. So it's like I need to declare my privilege there. So because of mom, I was able to get in. And it was quite easy to find my first job in India. My mom was sort of the technical lead and the business manager there. So it was pretty easy for me to get in. So there I did some software testing, which was fun. I also did some volunteering, which was great. So in those couple of years in between finishing undergrad and thinking about my next steps, I was thinking, okay, this is fun. What do I really want to do? And that's when Melbourne happened. So in 2015, I moved to Melbourne. It was very, very intimidating. And I'm guessing some people here would have also made that move. It can be quite intimidating to move to a new city as a student into a university like University of Melbourne, where the expectations are quite high, and you do sort of need to start performing from day one, and you need to do really, really well the minute you get in. So it was very overwhelming. Everything felt really new. The pace was quite different from what I was used to. The pace of masters here in Australia is structured differently, particularly University of Melbourne. So it wasn't easy. But as I went along, I fell in love with research. That's where I found my first real research project where I had to do a lot of the work and no one was telling me what to do, if that makes sense. And my project was investigating the microbiome diversity in women with bacterial vaginosis. So it's a condition that affects a lot of women, but it's not fully understood. So there I was looking at sequences collected from samples of these women and understanding how the imbalance, so when the good bacteria is outnumbered by the bad bacteria, is when you have these sort of infections. So it's really cool to understand how that diversity gets affected and how it changes over a period of time due to external risk factors, the medications that you're taking, and all of that. And at the time, was very clear that more people need to do research on women's health, and data and clinical questions was my happy place. There was a lot of stigma even in Melbourne. I encountered people who were uncomfortable talking about STIs, talking about women's health, but it seems counterproductive because STIs affect vulnerable people the most. So people who do have privilege need to talk about it more. And when I left my master's, I was very clear that I wanted to keep going in the field of STIs and women's health and think about vulnerable people and their health issues. When I was as I was getting closer to finishing my master's, I said yes to three things, which really changed my trajectory completely. I took up a role of communications assistant. So I said yes to a comms role while I was studying to translate research for humans. And it was a lot to do with organizing events and everything, and sort of writing up material for that. And towards the end of my second year, I said yes to an internship, which was in South Australia. So Adelaide, I moved to Adelaide. Went to a city I've never been to. It was a very quiet city, so I really struggled there, and built some networks that I still rely on today. And after I came back and as I was finishing my master's, I said yes to a remote role while finishing my master's, and I was continuing building on that tool. So this tool was really a visualization tool. So it was in visualizing protein-protein interaction in cancer pathways. So I still stayed in the health area, still used my computer science skills. But it was just a lot of fun meeting people and working in an office and all of that was really cool. And then as I was finishing my master's, I took up the role of health informatics specialist. It absolutely felt like a dream role for someone who's just finished their master's. I was not expecting, although I had a publication at the time. So I was pretty much a researcher because I had worked in research, but I still felt so new that I'm so new and I don't know how I'm going to start this journey. So it felt like a dream job. I still say that was my dream job because it was a new role. So the new role was basically translating how computer science, data, building infrastructure can all help with infectious disease emergencies and pandemic preparedness. And no one had been in that role before. And for me, it was very new. It was very exciting. I interviewed for it and I got it. And then I was so scared that how am I going to do this? There is no one who's done this before. And my mentor at the time and my supervisor, she was super supportive. And with her help, I was able to define this role. And then within a couple of years, it became pretty clear why this role was needed because the pandemic happened, the one that we were thinking about and preparing for. And when the pandemic happened, there were some projects where my expertise and my skills and the networks that I had built were pretty much in practice. So I had to work through all that and demonstrate what I had done in the past couple of years. A year or a bit into working with the Doherty Institute, I started feeling a little bit lonely, where you think, where are the other computer scientists? Wonder what they're doing. I'm here in infectious diseases. It would be great to meet other people. And that's when Melbourne Data Analytics Platform opportunity came along. And some of us at the university who were in existing jobs like me, but in different areas, so arts, humanities, music, physics, we all thought maybe this would be a really good secondment where we go in for part-time and then see how our skills can sort of add up. So we found a family basically. So we all got together and we became a group of people who had data and computer science expertise as the common ground, but we had other domain expertise that brought us all together. Some of the projects that I've really loved is this is the MDAP one. So stem cell registry, where we curated the backend data and I understood the concept of ontologies, which I hadn't learned before. So ontologies where things have relationships, the terms have a lot of relationships in between them. And the way you structure terminologies in your backend in the database, it matters a lot because they're all connected to each other. So we use ontologies to clean up a database to make searchability better. So you could go and look for things and you wouldn't find unrelated things because they were structured really well. Also, natural language processing was fairly new when I worked on that project, but I understood how you can use tools to process clinical free text. So people that put in free text in the notes, you can use natural language processing tools to find patterns, to find certain keywords that are of importance to you. And the more recent one is an agent-based model, which is my PhD project as well. But I applied that in my role at MDAP to develop a model where a person navigates support services, so the government that offers support services, thinking about how the journey from entering that support system to leaving that support system and what happens to an individual, and how different proportions of applications can change things. Some of the projects from my Apprise day or my Peter Doherty days, these are the projects that we implemented when the pandemic happened. So that's where all the concepts of preparedness, data, and all of that were implemented. So biobanking is where we set up a multi-site project where streams from specimen management. So when you go and get a test, so for example, you've given your specimen to test if you have COVID or influenza. Those specimens are used for testing, but they also have a lot of potential to test for other things as well as for research. So having those specimens sit there and nothing's happening and researchers are not able to find it can often mean it's a waste of resource. So building an online platform where you can, as a researcher, go in and look for these specimens for further research or for even public health response in the future was quite important. So we were trying to build a model where from different jurisdictions, there is ethics approval, governance approval, and those specimens become searchable. So this was right as I was finishing up with the prize with the Peter Doherty Institute. I worked on this. At the start of the pandemic, we were also working across different jurisdictions in Australia, funded by the Commonwealth, to bring together data sets that were collected as a part of COVID response. And there were quite a few challenges working across different jurisdictions. So this project was a really interesting experience for me to develop the infrastructure that you need as researchers sitting in a university, and how you would work with the government, how you would work with public health responders, and what data governance looks like in practice. So this was one of my favorite projects working for the Peter Doherty Institute. Some of the highlights. So Thanks for mentioning the STA one as well from my intro. I totally forgot that it was in my intro. Um, Being one of the 60 superstars of STEM back in 2021, 2022 was a fantastic experience. They teach you so much about science communication. And the more people you meet in that program, because you're one of 60, you realize that you're not really a superstar because there are so many other superstars out there who are doing amazing things. But that's what they teach you. They teach you to not have imposter syndrome and be confident about what you do. And you're selected in this cohort for a reason. I was invited to quite a few international conference panels remotely in 2020 to talk about role of data in pandemic response. I also managed to get a early career observership. So observership is when you attend committee meetings, government committee meetings that is focused on public health. And you're basically an observer there to understand how things work. So right from how case definitions are defined. So for a new infection, how do you say that this is a new infection case? So thinking about the case definition, what protocols are implemented to handle that as a country. So it was fantastic to just observe how these things work at the government level, at the federal government level. And I also appeared on live radio this year, and I also recorded a podcast for ABC. I love science communication. It's really good to go and talk about the work that you're doing, and that's what I'm doing here, really. So all these experiences were quite enjoyable for me as a researcher. Not all researchers do that, so it's not something that is a given. But if you do go down the path of research and you like talking about it, take up any opportunity that you get, and it only gets better. So the first one's always scary, but as you keep communicating your work, it gets easier. And then after all of that, I decided to do a PhD because I was starting to feel that I'm doing a whole bunch of different things in computer science, but I couldn't call an area mine. So I couldn't say that this is the one computer science method that I'm really, really, really good at, and this is my expertise. So I decided to do a PhD. And that brought together my interest in biology, computer science, STIs. And I decided to work on modeling, computationally modeling STIs. And that was a fascinating but a very messy problem that I'm still trying to solve. And I'm currently in my third year and I still work for MDAP part-time. So something to take away is I would say, your 20-year plan or your 5 or your 10-year plans, they are a starting point. They're never a boundary. So never think about your plan being you stick to that plan and nothing else goes outside of that. Not getting into med school was great. I don't think I would have survived. I think knowing how hard doctors work. Bioinformatics was a great wrong turn, but also the right wrong turn. People over prestige. So the right team teaches you more than famous people. So when you look up people, if you go down the research path or academia or industry or whatever, amazing people who have big names, big credentials, they're great. But sometimes it's about meeting the right people as opposed to famous people. Um, Taking up different opportunities along the way is really important. And then something I didn't mention was outside of research, I've also worked in hospitality. I have worked in aged care because when you move here as a student, no one's going to give you an office job to an international student, even though you've worked in an office before. So you have to work different sort of jobs. But I've learned so much even from those jobs. I was doing those jobs to pay my bills, but I've walked away, I think, a better human because I recognize how difficult those jobs are, and they teach you a lot. So also think about different jobs that you can do. Um, Data work can be a little bit boring, but if you know your way around data, it opens up a lot of opportunities, and you getting to know your data is really fun. So this is more a career thing. Um, and yeah, I often don't feel ready about anything, but I just deep dive into it, and that sort of works out. Sometimes it doesn't, but that's also important to learn that you probably need to be a little bit more ready before you dive into it. Um, so if you're early in your career, a few things to try this year. Build something small. So pick a question, build a tiny project. Done is better than perfect. Email one researcher. Curiosity beats credentials. Most people will reply. And I'll emphasize that a lot because when I was doing the odd jobs at the time, going from that to a communications assistant at a research institute, I was emailing everyone that I knew because I just wanted to do something in research. I needed to get in. So I was cold calling people, sending emails. And when the opportunity came along, it didn't feel like what I really wanted, but it was the first thing that I could do in research. And I just took that up. So email people, go and network. Get good at one tool. I realized that quite late. And that's why I started my PhD quite late. So get good at one thing, call one thing your expertise, and you can go on as many side quests as you want. Um, Volunteering somewhere is great. I even volunteered last year when time was absolutely non-existent for me while doing a full-time PhD and part-time work. I've always tried to volunteer every other year or every couple of years, just for a little bit of time. It does help quite a bit to give you some perspective on life. And talk to people about what you do. It's really important. People can offer you opportunities. They can introduce you to other people. So it's always good to get out and talk about your work. I don't know where I'll go after my thesis. So it's I'm modeling STI transmission. So ideally, I would love to work in that space. I do mentoring as well for students. I occasionally sleep. I write. And after PhD is finished, I think this is where I would like to work. So that's where I found the love that I have for research through working in health and data. So that's probably where I will be. But just thinking about what that looks like, and maybe there'll be a plot twist. Who knows? Um, you don't need a clear plan, just be willing to follow what's interesting, be curious, think about what other options exist, think about where you could end up. Don't bind yourself to your first mentor or your first job or your first opportunity. There are always people who will be out there to support you, and good mentors want to see you grow, and good people and good teams want to see you grow. So don't be afraid to explore things. Um, Again, none of the things that I did was planned. My plan was to be a doctor, and that's not what happened. But it was a good thing overall, where I've ended up. So thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Priyanka. And I think it's very good to hear the ups and downs of a career. And that's, one of the purpose of this webinar, because everyone talks about their successes. Few actually talk about the difficulties and challenges. And I've actually also been working maybe almost 14 years in the microbiome field. So very interested, and maybe we can have a chat sometimes later. But I think many researchers who aren't within this area might be a bit confused on the terms. So just as a warm-up question, while others may be thinking about their questions, what's the difference between bioinformatics and AI?
Whoa, okay.
Or like AI
AI can be
analysis,
used
I
in
guess.
bioinformatics as well. Yeah, I know what you mean. So let's talk about bioinformatics first, which will make it clear what it is and what it's not. So with bioinformatics, you often have a biological problem that you're investigating. And those biological problems are often broken down at the DNA and genetic and the protein level. And that's where all the data sets are coming from. So your biological problem could be heart disease, could be an infectious disease. But what underpins all that is right down to the DNA, the genome level, and which could be us as humans, so our human DNA, our human genetics, but also a pathogen. So if a virus is involved or a bacteria is involved, we also look into that. So with bioinformatics, you take the data that's processed, and all that data is related to genes, which are genomics, proteomics, so the protein structure, your other sort of biological functions or pathways in your body. And with that, you apply high throughput sort of techniques. So you look at something that processes hundreds of sequences at a time, your computer science methodologies with parallel computing and everything. And then you find patterns, and then you do some statistical analysis on it as well. So it is a combination of statistics, computer science, and biology. So that's how you investigate. It relies on having a lot of data, and that's all it can sort of, that's what it works off. It can do quite a bit of machine learning. So you can apply AI to bioinformatics, but AI on its own is a separate methodology which can be applied to bioinformatics. Bioinformatics on its own is a combination of biology, statistics, and computer science.
Cool. And then maybe back to Amanda, talking about multidisciplinary teams, because with different stakeholders and different people and their expertise and their background, they will have different technical language and interpretation of results. So do you think that the data visualization help the discussion, or because of these differences, could it actually hinder the discussion?
Great question, SJ. I think visualizing information and data is such a great way to help cross disciplinary bounds. And One project I was working on, we were looking at the experience of teachers, teachers who teach teachers. And so working with education experts who understood the frameworks of initial teacher education, and used a really different language to me, who's thinking about data and digital object identifiers. The differences in our languages was a hindrance, and visualizing it, so creating lots of small multiples, having them on a whiteboard that we could share and virtually move things around to make sense of things. I think for me, accessibility really matters. So not all of us are great at processing audible information. And when you're coming from really different disciplines, it feels like it's 100 times harder. So yeah, I love visual communication as a way to help connect, and to help to connect in a way that our words sometimes don't.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the different things, because science communication and data visualization both aims to make the results easier to understand for maybe people that are outside of your technical expertise. How different or how difficult would you say switching between more academic and more of a talking to a general public in terms of language and data visualization for both of you?
Priyanka, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. I think I've done science communication across different platforms, whether it's conference or podcast, or live radio. I think having a really good understanding of your concepts is good, and also often think about how would you explain that to someone who doesn't work in the field at all. So I work with different definitions. So I've got the academic one, I've got the expert one. When I'm not experts when I'm presenting to experts in academia, how do you talk about your work? But also breaking it down for lay audience. So I think it really depends on the audience. I know that's a very straightforward answer. But thinking about what matters to the lay audience, that if someone is working on a simulation technique of STIs, why should it matter to the lay public? It's because one of the reasons is that any sort of counterfactual scenarios, like we will not give medicine to anyone, that kind of thing cannot be done in real life. But you can do that in a computer environment. You can do that in mathematical probabilities. So the lay public should be interested in how computers are helping solve some of these problems, because some experiments are unethical to do in real life, but you can do that in your computer. So that completely extracts two lines from the massive project that you're doing, but it sort of conveys why things are important. And that's why knowing your audience is really, really good. Like, what kind of audience are you talking to? Even interdisciplinary researchers, you kind of need to tailor your communication for them, because they're experts in their field, but you need to make it digestible, that someone who has a foundational understanding of biology and computer science should be able to absorb what you're trying to communicate.
It's so true, Priyanka. And I think, talking about audience, quite often when we're trying to reach the general public, we think of it as a homogenous, like everyone's the same. The general public's all going to have a low understanding of, the heat island effect across metropolitan Melbourne, for example. But I think so often, particularly for research, we're thinking about, are we wanting to reach policymakers and drive change? Do we want to raise general awareness? Do we want to reach an international or a local audience? And so I think you're spot on, and it's something I believe in as well, knowing your audience and targeting it. And so for visualizations, quite often I love making unconventional ones and playing with form. And that works really well for an expert audience who already understands so much of the data. But then when I'm communicating something to an audience that are not familiar with, for example, how initial teacher education is structured across career stages, then that's the kind of thing that I work hard to communicate visually when talking about the research. So I think that, that focus on the audience is so important, and targeting an audience really helps us make visualizations and communication more effective.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of, especially researchers, just use bar plots and dot plots and, so I guess people are interested, talk to you guys, talk to MDAP.
Yes.
And now just switching gears a bit with researchers who may have considered entrepreneurship and find it really challenging to take that first step. And Priyanka, I don't know whether you are sitting on the fence right now or have you considered that, but with the ecosystem maturing now in Australia, and especially the recent announcement of Breakthrough Victoria and LaunchVic combining into Innovation Victoria, what are your some tips about, researchers looking to get into entrepreneurship? And maybe what are some of the differences there?
I think moving into entrepreneurship is an exhilarating roller coaster ride. And there's so much to learn and experience, stepping into what can be a fast moving and really different world, from how we were trained. I did computer science back in the day, and we didn't cover a lot of financial literacy that I think is so important when you're looking to build a business and realize a return on investment. So I think the nervousness is part of the excitement, and so I guess I would counsel people to think about that nervousness and that excitement. What is exciting about it, and what's going to sustain you? And I love working with Priyanka and the way that curiosity can connect. So being curious about your VC contacts, your friends who are also starting their own businesses, being curious and what really sparks something that you're interested in and can connect with as well. So I think there is that making sure you're on solid ground, in terms of your own interests, and seeing where you can grow and being open to those unexpected pivots and turns that might be a successful market.
Yeah. And maybe just a final question for the both of you, a simple one. But using Priyanka's background as a jumping board, so your decision between medicine and bioinformatics came down to a maybe not so difficult choice. But when opportunities like these arise, what are your recommendations about listening to your own heart versus listening to your mum's or a mentor's recommendation? Or maybe, what's hot out there?
Yeah, that's a really good point because even later stages of my career, I've had I've made decisions where I've taken inputs from mentors, but also kind of did my own thing a little bit. So I think I'm guided about 60 to 70% of my decisions would be informed by a mentor. But I do add my own element in there that, yes, this sounds like the right way to do it or the right thing to do, but what would be my way of doing it? So it's the balancing between also trusting some of your mentors because they obviously know more than what you know at this stage of your career because they have seen some of the pitfalls that you haven't. Um, so I do value the opinions and the feedback from my mentors, but you kind of also need to take a little bit of ownership and go, this is the right way to do it, or this is they're recommending, but how would I do it? Because I also need to, at the end of the day, feel happy and satisfied that I've listened to my heart and my brain and explored what interests me. So I think it's a balancing act. Like the PhD decision was a recommendation from some people. Some people said you kind of need to do it because career progression becomes a little bit easier. But I did it at the time when I was ready, as opposed to doing it when I was told to do it. The topic itself, some people had other ideas. They said maybe you can do that, and some people said maybe guys can be quite tricky, but I still started my gut. It's my difficulty to deal with, so I did it my way. But in that sort of situation, your primary supervisor, your PhD supervisor guides you on how to make it feasible and how to bring it into the structure of a PhD. And that's where that advice is really valuable. And because he has supervised more PhD students than I know, or he has supervised more PhD students, but I've only done PhD once, or I'm only doing it once. So this is where you value someone's experience and okay, this is what I want to do, but they'll tell me how to structure it in a way that I'm successful at the end of the 3.5, 4 year mark. So it's a balancing act, I think.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. When you're at a crossroads and you're thinking about which way to go, you're weighing it up, and there's so much uncertainty. I love being told things are impossible. There's something really appealing about it to me that makes me want to jump in and prove it is possible. But I think there is a bit of the old school advice about thinking about where, your next step, what's the step after it? Is it somewhere you want to be? And certainly for the way my career goes, I've never had a very linear path. And so that next step hasn't been what I imagined, the next step after the next step. But having in mind, that next step after the next step, is it sustainable? Is it likely to make money? Is it in demand? So I think for me, there's that tension between the jump in and figure it out, which is always rewarding and somewhat of a hallmark, I think, of innovation and technical challenges. But I think there is also that other part that if I go this way, then I can see the next step after that is going to be somewhere I want to be. Or if I go this way, the next step is somewhere I want to be.
Yeah, I think it comes back to Priyanka's point of being ready and prepared to take that step, but also jumping in a little bit. And as you say, with entrepreneurship, with a startup, there's always going to be some risks. So thank you very much. We'll leave it there for today. Thanks, Amanda and Priyanka, for sharing your career highlights and your background. And looking forward to chatting with you both again sometimes.
Thanks so much, SJ, and thank you so much to your community for having us here.
Thank you. Bye-bye.